So they've raised interest rates again, 5.25%, the highest rates that we have seen, I think, in 16 years, way before the great financial crisis. So this is a whole new world that we haven't seen. People's credit cards and their car payments and their mortgages by far are shocking people everywhere. So we want to hear from Jerome Powell what he is doing. And for my Canadian friends, remember that when something happens with the world reserve currency, we got to make sure that we're paying attention. They are our largest trading partner. We import an enormous amount of things from the United States. So we have to pay American dollars for all of that stuff. We have to make sure that we're on top of it. All right. So let's just jump across here. And I want you guys to let me know what you are noticing from Jerome Powell. Let's take a look at him.
Banking system is sound and resilient.
Oh, yeah, right. The banking system.
We will continue to monitor conditions in the sector.
Of course, it's the largest bank that has crashed, right? Second largest bank in their history. I wanted you to hear that he said it's very, very sound. Let me show you some interesting spots that I found because I watched it so that you don't have to. If we go to 450, let's just pay attention here.
The labor market remains very tight. Over the first 3 months of the year, job gains averaged 345,000 jobs per month. The unemployment rate remained very low in March at 3.5%. Even so, there are some signs that supply and demand in the labor market are coming back into better balance.
Okay, so we have to jump into that, all right? He keeps mentioning all the time how important it is that employment becomes softening. But when you use words like softening employment, we're like, oh, what does that mean? Like, I like a soft pillow. Like, what is softening? Or he mentions that labor has to come into balance. They're making those same statements in Canada all the time. That means what they really, really want is they want an equal number of jobs available as the number of people that are unemployed. Meaning if there's 3 million people looking for work in the United States, that they have 3 million available jobs. Currently, where they're sitting right now, they have like 3 million available jobs and 6 million people on unemployment or something like that. We are way, way over his 1-in-1 target. And so even by their own projections, this calendar year, they expect 1 million Americans to lose their jobs this year. Ideally, when we watched them in front of Congress, they wanted 2 million jobs to be gone. Now, they'd never want to say, we want Americans to lose jobs. No one in Canada says, we want Canadians to lose their jobs. They'll say those terms, a softening of the labor market, or they want the labor market to come into balance. But let's not be children. Let's call it just what it is, right? And be straight with people, because this is what they want. Remember, they keep talking about wage spiral, because as life becomes more expensive, what are you going to do? You're going to go to your boss. Listen, man, I'm screwed. I can't afford rent. Can you give me a raise increase, an increase? And they're going to give them money. And so what we're seeing is 3, 4, 5% going up every year, which is bad in the government's eyes. You have more money to spend now and people are spending it. But this is a very bad way of looking at things, because remember, the government can only affect demand by raising the price of it too high. If you can't afford an apple at $2, he's going to tell you, well, I'm going to solve your problem for you. I'm going to make the apple $5. How does that make any sense? The answer here is we need more apples. We got to produce more stuff. That's what we need. All right, let's continue on with Jay Powell here and see what else he's got to say. My next one here is at 7:55, I think it was. Let me check. Take a listen to this.
In turn, these tighter credit conditions are likely to weigh on economic activity, hiring, and inflation. The extent of these effects remains uncertain.
Did you notice that? Listen to that again.
For households and businesses. In turn, these tighter credit conditions are likely to weigh on economic activity, hiring, and inflation.
Tighter credit conditions. This is one of the most important things that you could be paying attention to right now. Tighter credit conditions means you cannot get a loan, period. Maybe I'm dating myself too much, but a lot of people, if you remember back to 2009, 2010, the banks were not giving out mortgages, zero. In addition to that, what else did you notice? Some of them were requiring 80% 8% down, 8-0. So if you're going to go buy $1 million home, you have to have $800,000, 800,000 down on that property. Who has that kind of money lying around? Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what people are telling you on the news. It drives me crazy where they say immigration is going to fix it. Absolutely, unequivocally proven wrong. This is not correct. Canada just brought in 1 million people. 1 million last year. It's a record for Canada. Just to put that in perspective for the Americans, America brings in 1 million per year. So our population is a tenth the size. Imagine that we're bringing in per capita 10 times more than the United States. We're not building any more homes. It's not the answer. The only way that that would work is if they brought in so many billions of dollars that they would be able to build a lot more properties, but that's not what's happening. They're mostly refugees coming in from war-torn countries. They need it, but we're not building any homes. We have nowhere to put people, and the supply strain is really, really bad. Also, when you bring in 1 million people that are all jumping into the job market, it now skews those numbers. So what we're seeing isn't really, really accurate when they're reporting on those numbers. But what they keep mentioning is those tightening of the credit conditions. This is what's going to change everything, is because if no mortgages are available, now you guys know I'm a real estate broker myself. We sell properties. This is what we do. But everybody I deal with is getting a mortgage. Even people that are wealthy, they are getting a mortgage. Just try to imagine what would happen if there's no more mortgages. Everyone just says cash only, nothing else. Literally, think about that. There would be zero business out there. All of that talk about, don't worry, David, immigration is going to fix it. Unbelievable. No. Or they'll tell you, David, hardly any homes are available for sale right now. What does that have anything to do with it? If zero people can afford a mortgage or can even be given a mortgage, there is no property selling. Do you know what I mean? So that's not the answer. The answer is liquidity. We need cash in the system. We need that grease on those wheels to keep them turning. If the liquidity dries up, that is everything. And so they're mentioning the lag effect. And so we talk about this many times in other videos, and we show people about what that is. So we're going to go back to the lag in just a second. I just want to finish this. But that lag effect normally takes 18 months to hit. We're not even close to the 18 months from the first rate hike, let alone this rate hike, which is the 10th one. So we have 18 months to wait from rate hike 2, 18 months to wait for number 3. So if they raise today, we won't even see the effects of this rate hike for another 18 months. Keep that in mind. All right, let's go back to Mr. Powell. That is very important when he's talking about tighter monetary credit. Now, talking about what I'm talking about, the lag effect, listen to him.
The committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, and economic and financial developments.
Okay, so I want you to he blows past that word, but that word is everything.
The committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation.
The cumulative effects, did you hear that? Maybe I didn't share it properly. The cumulative effects and the lag. That's everything right there. There's your answer. They know that the cumulative effects and the lag is going to come back and bite us. Where are we going? It's very clear to the people who work behind the curtain, but to the general public who is taking their advice from FinTwit out there and all of these other salesmen who are trying to sell online. I've been online over a year telling people, please stop. Don't be buying right now. Way, way, way too dangerous. Yet here we are. All right, so let's continue on with Mr. Powell here. And I have one more comment that I wanted to show you. That's the last one. This is about future interest rate drops or hikes.
Yeah, statement from March, we had a sentence that said the committee anticipates that some additional policy firming may be appropriate. That sentence is not in the statement anymore. We took that out, and instead we're saying that In determining the extent to which additional policy firming may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time, the committee will take into account certain factors. So that's a meaningful change that we're no longer saying that we anticipate. And so we'll be driven by incoming data, meeting by meeting, and we'll approach that question at the June meeting.
All right. So I think that's an important part as well when we're talking about these rate hikes. Remember that these rate hikes that are going up, he says we're going to be talking about it in the June meeting next. The June meeting most likely will be a pause. They do not want to shock the markets. They always have, we're going to get the meeting minutes in a couple weeks. But when they do, they always want to lay out what their future is and what future rate projections are going to be. Why do you think that it was like 95% of people thought that the rate would go up today, including myself? I was saying that it was going to go up. So this is why we have to look at what their projection is. They don't think anymore that they got to raise anymore. The reason is because that lag effect is going to come and kick everybody's butt. It takes a while. Remember, when you're going to shop for a property, today that rate went up, right, in the United States. So if they're going to shop for a property tomorrow and look for a house, the mortgage broker is going to call them right away and say your rate is higher so you can afford less house. Immediately, the buyers are affected by it the next day. Immediately. But think about sellers for a moment. If they could have got $1 million yesterday and they get a phone call from their agent, go, the rates went up. We're going to have to lower your price down to $950. They're going to go, no, I think I'm going to keep it on the market for $1 million a bit longer and see. And they wait and they wait and they wait. So this is why the sellers always take a long time to go away. The buyers are instantly affected, instantly, every single time. So we went over a whole bunch of stuff earlier in another live. You can go back and take a look at that as well. When we looked at it today, we're seeing that the indexes are down, the bond rates are down, Canadian to US dollar is down. The US dollar is on the way up. So for Americans coming to Canada, amazing. Canada already films almost all Hollywood movies here, it feels like. So even more people will be coming here ongoing. It's a great deal for Americans coming up. It's very, very expensive for Canadians to go down to the United States. That's a big, big difference. But we're going to continue to see these things happening over and over again. This is very, very predictable. We have seen some property prices go up right now. And some people say spring market, load of bollocks. Last spring, what happened? Home prices were absolutely collapsing. That's because the interest rates, guys. That's the little secret. But this spring now all of a sudden is going up. And why? Because the interest rate that they're getting charged on the mortgages are coming down. Well, hang on, David. I don't understand what you're talking about because you just said that interest rates went up, right? So remember that there's two parts. Number one is the rate from the US Bank, Federal Reserve in Canada, Bank of Canada, okay? Government, and then they tack on 1 or 2% commission for themselves. That's how the banks make their money. So they'll get the money for 5.25, which is the rate today for the US, 5.25 to them, and then they'll add 2% to it and give it to you for 7.25. That's their commission. So a lot of banks, since Silicon Valley Bank went down, that started all the trouble, and Signature Bank collapsed, and now this last one, First Republic, collapsed. The Canadian banks are intrinsically linked. During Silicon Valley Bank collapse, they lost $20 billion, even though we're in another country. So the banks are running scared. They need cash. They're lowering the amount of commission that they're adding to that rate. Because of that, that instantly allows people to buy more. So 1% affects the property prices by 10. So when an interest rate goes up 1%, home prices drop 10%. But how long does it take to have that 10% get affected? That's my question. If they raise it, how long does it take? It can take 6 months for that to happen. It's a slow burn. So try to remember that. Now, they're mentioning that this lag event, they always are talking about this lag, but I wanted to show you about inflation and how they control inflation. I think that this is important. Now, don't make fun of my drawing, okay? I'm a very bad drawer, but right here, I put Wonder Bread. I always use a bread example, but just go with me for this for a second. How do you make bread? You're going to get some grain, some wheat. And where do they make a lot of wheat? Well, they make it in Ukraine. You're going to get some yeast, and that comes from Mexico. The plastic bag for Wonder Bread is made in China. The ink that is on Wonder Bread, the ink is made in Russia. The plastic tab, around that little top part, that's going to be made out in Malaysia. It's going to all be assembled in the US where it is baked. The gas, though, that goes into the vehicles to bring it to you and to bake the bread all comes from Saudi Arabia. So something as simple as a loaf of bread could have all of these different inputs, and it gets even worse than that, to be honest with you. Think about, I'm saying, well, it's being brought on a truck from the gas in Saudi Arabia, but the truck may have been made in the United States with steel from Russia and parts coming from Taiwan. Do you see how complicated just a loaf of bread could get? It gets very expensive. So when we're talking about inflation, they want to talk about raising interest rates to combat inflation. A lot of it is not even within their control. We know that there's a war in Ukraine right now. So if their grain cannot get to market, that automatically will create inflation. Completely out of the US control. I know that the majority of the inflation came from US printing a lot of dollars. Yes, Canada did the exact same thing. But the war in Ukraine, that has nothing to do with them. They can't affect that. The fact that China over here doesn't want to give them or trade with them anymore. If China decides not to send those bags anymore, what are you going to do? Not much that you can do. What happens if Saudi Arabia pulls away from the petrodollar agreements that they signed in 1974 with President Nixon? All right. So if that happens, then what? Then it's inflation. My point is, on something as simple as a loaf of bread, the number of inputs, if you actually dig into it, is dizzying. Any one of those things could get onto there. And so when they talk about there's only two types, remember, when you go to economics class 101, not just the first day, first hour, is the law of supply and demand. And the US, all they can do is raise interest rates. They cannot flip a button today just as easily as making an announcement and say bread for everyone. They can't conjure that out of thin air. They're not Jesus. But the answer, what everybody needs, is they can't afford stuff. The crazy part is we somehow think that if people can't afford stuff, the answer is to make everything more expensive. Doesn't really make sense, right? If we're rational adults, right? The answer is we got to make more stuff. We need the stuff. We need food. We need gas. We need cars. We need all the kids' clothes. We need stuff. So the answer isn't to raise interest rates and hurt people more. The answer is actually to make more, if that makes any sense. So, there is always this argument between demand and supply. The answer is always supply. And so if we are doing what we're doing now with all this friendshoring and reshoring of all of our manufacturing in Canada and the United States, we now have to do it with $50 labor and not $15 labor anymore, which is going to lead to a lot of inflation. Nothing the governments can do. So when you're going to be making your financial plan for the next 5 years, 10 years, plan for 10% inflation for the next 5 years. If you plan for that, you are going to be ahead of everybody else as all this friendshoring is happening. So make sure that you are being proactive and not reactive. And the next 2 years is going to dictate the next 2 decades of your life. I promise you. Anyway, guys, please consider subscribing. Please consider liking this. If you have any comments or any questions, please leave them below. I read all of them. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a pleasant